Hi folks, it's me, Richard James the Socio again, bringing you this immense, massive story why the Rockefellers killed JFK, RFK, and ordered Watergate. That's just a few of their numerous crimes against God and man. I'm standing in front of this macabre building here. It's called the Allen Institute. Institute Allen Memorial was built here like time of the Civil War. I'm here, of course I should say, I'm here in Montreal. This is what they call the Golden Square Mile of Montreal. I think I'm going to pan the camera here so you can get a better look. I'm really standing on a hillside. If I take one step backwards, I'm going to get seriously injured. So I'm going to just pan the camera here a little bit, so you can see the golden city of Montreal. There it is. There it is, the glimmering city of Montreal. And we're looking right down at McGill, right down the hill. You're talking about McGill University, and this was like the Fifth Avenue of Montreal back in the day. Still a lot of wealth and money around here. And okay, I'm gonna swing this camera back. I was here last summer. Now I'm gonna aim the camera up a little so you can see how tall this building is. There it is there. I can't get any further back because if I do, I'm gonna go down a cliff. So you're gonna have to kind of accept just looking at the front door. I was here last year. The building was overgrown with vegetation, so they're cleaning it up. You can see some construction barriers and stuff. If I get a chance, I'm going to go in. Now, they're closed today. This is Jean Baptiste Day, so we're celebrating the John the Baptist today here in Montreal. But going back, I'm going to cut right to the chase here. As I talked about before, this is one of the main laboratories when the Rockefellers developed the MKUltra, their MKUltra experiments to produce. It basically was a weapon system. It was a massive weapon system. We don't even know the dimensions of it. I'm sure it was all financed by taxpayers' money because the Rockefellers are not going to use their own money. But this is one of the places where they did experiments on human beings, living subjects. And people came here as patients seeking help for their mental distress. This is a psychic hospital, you know. And the Rockefellers injected them with all kinds of poisons, mainly LSD, and these patients didn't know that any of this, and these patients didn't know they were turned into guinea pigs. This is how ruthless these Rockefellers are. This was the most notorious location for MKUltra experiments. Actually, they were conducted at many locations, including Columbia University in New York City, but this was kind of their most infamous location. And how is it tied to the JFK assassination? And Oswald, all the famous assassinations or infamous assassinations of the 60s were designed to put Nelson Rockefeller in the White House. They were all basically Manchurian candidates, especially Oswald and Sirhan and Squeaky Fromm. They were all, now they never came here, they were not trained here, but this is where they did the experiments to develop the technology. And then there, of course, this technology eventually is going to be deployed out into the streets of America to take out sitting leaders like JFK. Now, Assas was never here, but he was weaponized. What happened in 19, he was a weapon system. He was a deadly weapon, as deadly as a 500-pound bomb. What happened was, in 1958, when Nelson Rockefeller got elected governor of New York State, he employed 70 people. He hired a team of 70 people charged with one thing: put Nelson Rockefeller in the White House by 1960 with no limitations at all. Whatever you got to do it. Whatever you got to spend it. Just put Nelson Rockefeller in the White House, and if you got to kill people, don't hesitate to do so. This was their credo. Now, what happened, Oswald, tracing back to Oswald now, so this happened in 57. He was elected in 57, so it goes into 58. And October that year, Oswald was dispatched to go to Russia to be basically sheep-dipped, to parade him as essentially a Manchurian candidate of sorts. And that was the story of Manchurian Candidate. If you ever watched the book, read the book or watch the movie, the Manchurian Candidate was sent to Russia. And he came back home, Oswald did, with a wife in tow, which was that part of the Rockefeller plot. But here's the thing. I believe the plot to kill President Kennedy, in part to put Nelson Rockefeller in the White House, but really started out as a plot to kill Vice President Richard Nixon. Now, after 40 years of research, a lot of dots we got to connect up here. All right. Number one, there was a gaping hole left in the Kennedy assassination whitewash that the Warren Commission put together. The Warren Commission report is essentially written by Nelson Rockefeller. Things didn't go completely as planned, so then they had to scrub any point about a conspiracy involving Russians. They had to scrub that. So here's the thing. Why would an alleged communist assassinate a progressive president? Okay. President Kennedy was the president who made the phone call. You know what I'm talking about. There was a book written about the phone call that changed America. Kennedy called Coretta King about 2-3 weeks before the Kennedy assassination and offered he was, of course, Massachusetts Senator Kennedy then, and offered Mrs. King any assistance. Her husband was jailed for involvement in civil rights protests, and Kennedy was pretty much a 19-second phone call. Said, well, if I can help you anyway, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. And of course, Mrs. King long remembered his Massachusetts accent. Well, why would an alleged communist want to take out a sitting president who's a progressive? Say, well, you got to understand, when Nelson got elected in 1957, he's going for the White House, literally gunning for the White House. And who really was in his way? JFK wasn't even a blimp on the radar screen yet. Who was in his way? It was Richard Nixon, Vice President Richard Nixon. He was the hurdle that Nelson had to remove from his path to the White House. Kennedy jumped up in the picture later in the story. So the original plotting and everything was to assassinate Vice President Richard Nixon. Now, the Rockefellers had this immense hatred for Richard Nixon. It started when he was Congressman Richard Nixon. And he was a Republican conservative congressman investigating what? He was investigating the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, and the Ford Foundation. Okay? But specifically, he seized on the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Now, you know the story. These were conservatives who believed that these so-called philanthropic foundations were being run by communists. And, you know, it's all famous history. There's books written about it, and Elger Hess and Richard Nixon. It was and that's how Nixon got his national publicity, was able to get on that bottom half of that ticket with Eisenhower. Elger Hess was Nelson Rockefeller's right-hand man in setting up the UN and tied in with the League of Nations, was a Rockefeller creation, but never got passed by Congress. The Rockefeller shrunk in. It never got ratified by Congress or Senate. So the hatred of the Nixon, the hatred the Kennedys had for Nixon goes back to that 1948, when the House Un-American Activities Committee began these investigations. Now here's the thing. This is where you have to delve into the history of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Okay. First of all, it was not started by Andrew Carnegie, all right? It was started by a man named Nicholas Murray Butler, who was, for half a century, was the boss man at Columbia University. All right, now I could get into a huge genealogy of the dynastic families of the Hudson River Valley, but I'm going to cut to the chase here. Who was the founder of Columbia University? It was Alexander Hamilton. He had married into the old dynasties of the Hudson River. He had married into the Schuyler dynasty, the Rensselaers, the Tenbrook dynasties, the Stuyvesant dynasty. Okay, well, I could go on and on and on. Well, Columbia University was originally connected with Trinity Church and King's College, which was all British. Well, the British lost the American Revolution, so these old families went in there. Trinity Church was endowed with acres and acres of Manhattan real estate. Now, back then, it was either stony farmland or wilderness. I don't know exactly, but a lot of that, these people went in, these elites of the Hudson River, they went in and they pretty much carpetbagged Trinity Church. But I'll tell you something, a lot of people don't know about Trinity Church. And this is why Rockefeller is always trying to seize control of churches. Trinity Church is still, to this day, despite losing acres and acres of its land, is still one of the biggest real estate holders of Manhattan real estate. Okay, that's said. Well, Hamilton moved to college from basically the corner of Wall Street and Broadway. Okay, he moved it north to where it is today, Columbia University. Okay, now Rockefeller Center was built on, the original buildings were put on 23 acres of land owned by Columbia University, which I believe was land that originally was owned by Trinity Church, which these elites, actually the one family that got most of that land was the Astor family. They bought up acres and acres of Trinity Church land for pennies, and then they took 100-year leases on acres and acres on land for pennies. Okay, now here we are. Now, we're going to Columbia University now. Alexander Hamilton's co-founder, who's been in the news lately, if you've been watching the news lately, they've been rioting there at Alexander Hamilton Hall at Columbia University's protesting. Okay, so he's back in the news again, Alexander Hamilton. Well, here's the thing to understand. Who was in the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace? It was Alger Hess. It was David Rockefeller. It was Watson, IBM. It was Dwight Eisenhower, was president of Columbia University. And here's the thing I want to get to. As I said, Nicholas Murray Butler founded the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. It was not Andrew Carnegie. It was Nicholas Murray Butler, who's a relative to Alexander Hamilton. He's a Schuyler. Okay. He was the boss man of Columbia University for 50 years. Alexander Hamilton married General Philip Schuyler. Alexander Hamilton married Philip Schuyler's daughter, who was Elizabeth. All right, we can tie in for hours and hours and hours of genealogy. It was Nicholas Murray Butler who sat down 1930 circa with the Rockefellers and signed with the Rockefellers a 75-year lease. Rockefeller Center was built on a 75-year lease of land owned by Columbia University, it was signed by Nicholas Murray Butler, a descendant of Alexander Hamilton, a descendant of the powerful dynasties of the Hudson River Valley. Now, here's the thing. How is this tied to JFK assassination? Well, if you go back into history and you look at the makeup of the Warren Commission, Allen Dulles was on the Warren Commission. Okay, his brother was for 15 years president of the Carnegie Endowment. They just call it the Carnegie Endowment, not to be confused with the Carnegie Endowment of New York. There are several Carnegie endowments. This one, I should say, there's several Carnegie 501c3s. The Carnegie Corporation of New York, one of the biggest ones. But this is the Carnegie, what they call a Carnegie Endowment. All right, it was being run out of Columbia University. Then again, who was on the board of it? Elger Hess was president. John Foster Dulles was chairman of the board. David Rockefeller was on it. Dwight Eisenhower, president of Columbia University. Now Rockefeller's got him that job. Dwight Eisenhower was a Rockefeller hand puppet president. And the Watson family, IBM, and others. I can't remember the whole list right now. John Foster Dulles died in the 50s of cancer. So his brother was. Now here's the thing I just found out recently. But it all fits in what I've been saying for the last 20, 30 years, that this truth, the path of truth to the Kennedy assassination and Robert Kennedy assassination and all lead to the front door of the Rockefellers. And it all traces back to these old dynastic families that controlled the Hudson River Valley. What I found out was the Dulles brothers are related to Nicholas and Murray Butler. They're related to Alexander Hamilton. Bingo. What a wow factor that was. Now it goes like this. General Phil Schuyler's secretary / confidant / right-hand man was a man named John Lansing Jr. The Lansings came into the Hudson Valley in 1638. All right. And John Lansing married into the family of the Tenbrook family. Well, that all related to Alexander Tenbrook. General Abraham Tenbrook commanded the battle. He was the commanding battlefield general, the Saratoga battle, victorious general. And there was 9 Rockefeller members served under his command at the battle. And Captain Deal Rockefeller's father's brother was John Rockefeller's grandfather, or great-grandfather. You see how it starts? It goes back centuries into the history of New York State and starts to track back to New York City. But why so much so is because these old families owned the land